What is the secret to landing your next interview? Today, we want to do something that will help you. What I need you to do is to pay very close attention. Now, we want to play a scenario of what you would expect if you're in a real life interview. I have with me here somewhere. He's going to be interviewing me. He's the interviewer, and I am the interviewee. And what we are going to do is to dive into a typical Scrum Master technical interview. What I want you to do is to pay attention to how I respond to the questions so that you can replicate that in your next interview. Now, before we go ahead, there are a couple of things I want you to pay very close attention to. The first thing is that you want to pay close attention to my lighting. My lighting is really, really good. My background doesn't really have a lot of distraction. And then you also see I have enough space to my left, to my right, and then above my space in a way that if I'm doing hand gesture, it's going to be great. Now, the second thing you want to pay attention to is that I do not use a blurry background. These are some of the common mistakes that we do in our interview that take out so many points from us. But then without wasting much of your time, we're going to get started. And we want to do this every week. So if you're not subscribed to the Scrum chat room, make sure you hit the subscribe button and also make sure you share this video so that someone that's looking for a job will learn exactly how to take their next interview. And I'm going to bring them our interviewer on board and we are going to go ahead to get started. So assume that I just came into the video and then the interviewer was in charge. So Mr. Interviewer, take over.
All right. Thank you, sir, for having me. Uh, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. We're excited to learn more about your experience and show how you can contribute to our team. Now, this role focuses on leading Scrum practices within our enterprise health organization. To start, could you briefly introduce yourself and share a little bit about your background in Agile methodologies?
All right, thank you very much for that question. And I'm super excited to be given this opportunity to interview with your company. I have about 7 years of experience working in the Scrum field, but prior to that, I have been in the leadership and project management space for over 14 years. So I'm not just bringing in experience in Scrum, but a whole experience in Agile leadership. But then I want to focus a bit more on the last two projects which I work on, one of which was a head company where we're building a centralized system that could help a seamless flow of data across all our departments in the US and out of the US. And then in my most recent project, where I'm supporting two teams, we are working on a data admin system to be able to help uh, data admin system, sorry about that. We're working on a data admin system that it's helping the company to be able to manage all the intake of customers and also to communicate with the client in all of the different phases of their visit in the hospital.
Okay. Thank you so much for that answer. Okay. I would like to ask you, as a Scrum lead here, you work closely with cross-functional teams to deliver high-value healthcare solutions. This includes mentoring teams, improving agile practices, and delivering and driving collaboration. Let's dive into some specifics about your experience and approach. Okay. Can you walk us through a time when you successfully facilitated a challenging sprint? What steps did you take to resolve the issues?
All right, great. Um, One thing I've learned about spring planning or the spring in general is that if you don't start off with effective planning, your spring is going to be very challenging. Now, I want you to imagine getting into a meeting where you don't really have the clear agenda expectation. You end up really wasting your time. So, a challenging spring for me is when the spring planning is not well defined or a sprint planning is not successful. What I mean by the sprint planning being successful, simply what I mean is that we don't have a clear understanding of our capacity and our load, and then we bring in stories into the spring which are not clear enough for all team members, and we do not have enough agreement, or I would say confident vote, to move ahead. I've hardly had that situation because I ensure that prior to every spring, all of this is handled. But I've also worked in a position as an agile coach where I was able to observe several of these problems with my team where team constantly carry over. And what I did was to collaborate with the Scrum Master there to find out why they think or why he think that the team is carrying over, which he was not really able to pinpoint the issue. So I then advised him to use the retrospective as a means to examine why the team feels that they are having carried over. When he did that, the team thought that most of the stories come up with unclear, unclear description. So why in the middle of the spring they will have to discover more about the stories. So what I advise him to do is to work with the team and to work with the stakeholder to ensure that they have refinement right ahead of time, and also ensure that they are slicing their stories to a maximum of three uh, story point, just to make sure that they go into deeper understanding since it was a new project for them. When they started doing that, this really kind of created a lot of changes. And although their sprints were challenging, when they started doing this now, it was a game changer and they started having successful sprints.
Okay, that's very good. Now, please, how do you handle conflicts between team members during a sprint? Can you provide an example?
Great. Now, one of the things I like to always talk about conflict is definitely not about two people fighting. It's just difference in ideas, and we expect this all the time. Because when you see conflicts as just people have looking at the same thing from different perspective, it gives you a better understanding first to realize that, or to have the understanding that it's something which is expected to happen. So in that case, the first thing I always do is ensure that I build trust among my team member in a way that when we bring up such conversation, we are okay to talk about it. Now, the first thing I do is trust. Building trust is the baseline for every conflict. And I always make a joke sometime. I ask people like, hey, imagine you're a couple and you're having issues and a stranger walking. Are you gonna say, hey, we need you to help us resolve this? No. So that's the one thing I pay very close attention to as a Scrum Master. Now, building that trust. When you build that trust, it's easier to have conversation, or it's easier to have a one-on-one with your team member and they can open up to you without any challenge. Now, when they open up, my goal is not to find out who is right or who is wrong, but to look at how I can help them align to the bigger goal, which is the business value. So I facilitate conflicts, more or less helping both parties to see how their action is impacting the entire team from achieving business goal, and how coming to an alignment can help us move faster. With this, it's not about them, it's about working collaborative as a team. And this approach has helped me a lot in resolving conflict.
Okay, thank you, sir. Now, I would like to also ask you, have you worked on projects within the healthcare industry before? If so, how did you ensure compliance with industry regulations while maintaining agile delivery?
Yeah, I've worked on a couple of health projects, and one of which we actually built a centralized system for the state to be able to collaborate with all of their clients that were supplying, that were helping them to align on their program for development disability. Now, with the health industry, there's quite a lot of compliance issues that need to be followed. What we did in order to ensure that this is aligned, first, I would say Agile doesn't really alter the way organizations do work. It only come in to help in processes and ensuring that we are moving faster towards result. So the first thing is that Agile itself, it's policy compliant, which means it's not going to contradict with that. Now, but what we also did to ensure that compliance is being made is that each of the teams that we work with, we had a compliant associate as part of the team. So ensuring that if there are certain policies which are not supposed to be worked on by everybody in the team, uh, they are listed as they are listed as private or as confidential. So in that case, only those with the right permission are assigned to work to that. So I've had a scenario like that, which only those with clearance or certain level of clearance could work on that. Now, I've also have another situation with a health team where when it comes to issues which requires high level of compliance and regulation, there was a separate team that handled that. But then when it comes to agile processes and compliance, agile processes do not really violate that. Agile processes just ensure that work is organized in a way that stakeholder can see can all have a clear visibility and transparency of what is happening, and also ensuring that we are completing it on time.
Thank you. Now, what strategies have you used to manage dependencies across multiple teams in a healthcare setting?
Great. So I'm working in an enterprise healthcare setting, and we have Jira Line, which made it easier for us to manage dependency because you definitely go to the dependency future. You can key in your dependency and you can be able to link up with the different teams we are dependent on, and that can clearly kind of populate in the program board. But I've also worked in an area in companies where they don't have these tools that can clearly map out dependencies or so. Now, a couple of ways I handle my dependency. Number one, I've used dependency log. With dependency log, what I simply do is that I clearly map out all the dependencies that my team is having with other teams. And then I ensure that I put the contact person who I'm going to be collaborating with. I also make sure I collaborate with them to have information on when they expect to complete their own work. And I now use effective communication to track that. Now, if I work in a setting, which in some of the cases I have done that, where we have shared access to all the different Scrum bar. It's easier for me to tag those dependencies as part of my stories in Jira or my ADO by using block to link to. In that case, I can easily, or anyone working on the story can easily know that this story is dependent on these. And while we do our daily stand-up and we're working through, we understand what are the different follow-up we need to do in order to get to the result.
Thank you. So, in your experience, how do you engage stakeholders who are unfamiliar with agile practices?
That's a great question, and I think that's the foundation for Agile. The first thing many people often miss out is the fees that stakeholders are not part of the Scrum ceremony. It's only for developers, Scrum Master, and PO. But then the first people who should be engaged in the process of Agile are stakeholders because they are the one providing information and leadership. So what I often do if I join an organization and I realize that the stakeholders are not too versed with Agile, what I do is that I create awareness raising session where I can effectively collaborate with them and make sure that they understand what Agile is, what is expected from them, what is expected from the team, and ensuring that everyone is doing their own part. In that way, awareness helps them gain this clarity and collaboration is no longer an issue.
Thank you. So, can you share an example of how you've aligned product owners and team members on project priorities?
Right. Product owner play a very pivotal role because they are the one keeping constant communication with the stakeholders and they understand clearly what are the priorities. So we use backlog refinement as an event to create this clarity. Now we also use our spring planning some of the time, but the main event for me is backlog refinement, ensuring that every team member has clarity on what priorities are and why we're having those as priority. And this is where the PO effectively communicate with the team members on what is the order of work and how do we put that in the sprint. So the main focus for me would be effective backlog refinement as an opportunity to make this priority known.
Okay. Now I'd like to know, what metrics do you use to measure team performance and sprint success?
All right, team performance, it's something you can avoid because anything you cannot measure, you cannot improve. So when it comes to team performance, first, the primary data I look into are my velocity chart, my bend down chart. But then qualitative data is also very important for me. During my daily stand-up, I'm clearly monitoring what is happening with the movement of stories on the board. I don't need to go to my bend down chart to see if a story is completed or not. So just by observing what is going on as I'm running my daily stand-up, that is already enough data for me to start engaging with my developers to ensure that they finish their work on time. So uh, performance for me is not a surprise. These matrices are very important, keeping a close eye and ensuring that you're constantly communicating them. But then if I'm pulling back to want to look at what has been happening within the last 5, 6 spring, my velocity chart gives me a sneak peek of what is happening. If I'm looking at how data is being completed within a spring or within a spring, my bend down chart is the go-to because it tells me, are we pulling work to the end of the spring? Are we finishing work on just one day? How is that curve actually spread out? So two go-to chart, the bend down chart, the velocity chart, but I also do a lot of qualitative analysis, observations, and communication of the team.
Okay, thank you. Now, how do you report progress to leadership in a way that ensures transparency and trust?
I use dashboards and I often build a conference page where I document all my spring retrospective and also all the risks that the team are engaging. So in most of the cases, I can just share the link with my managers and other stakeholders so that they can have a clear understanding of what is going on. So not just communicating by email, but creating a dedicated page on a conference where I can effectively document this report, make sure that there are visuals in a way that they won't spend a lot of time to understand what we're talking about.
Okay, thank you. Now, how would you mentor teams to adopt agile principles and practices effectively?
All right. So when it comes to mentoring, I would say the three phases. We have teaching, we have coaching, we have mentoring, and all of them go hand in hand. And this is simply because if a team doesn't really understand Agile, you can mentor them, you need to teach them because you only mentor when someone is already versed with what they are doing. Now, when we teach them, you start coaching them how to use it. What I do to ensure that this is effective is to ensure that I create an environment which is conducive for open communication. And I do constant assessment to see where my team is, what they need to understand, and how they are implementing what they have learned. So based on those measures, I know exactly where to come in and teach some practices. I know exactly when to coach them how to use this effectively and how to also sit back and just mentor them in their process of growth.
Okay, thank you. Now, what's your approach to building a culture of continuous improvement within teams?
That's a great question. My first go-to is the retrospective. Retrospective is such a powerful event that help us to not just reflect what is happening to the team, but use that as an opportunity to create action item or longer vision that can help the team grow. Now, if you very keen to retrospective, now the first thing you realize that your retrospective doesn't just happen at the end of the sprint. From day one of the sprint, you need to already start documenting what is happening at the level of the team. What are some of the challenges that are coming up? So when you go to the retrospective, you're not just waiting for your team to tell you what went wrong, what they can improve, and what next. You already have a build up information that you can use that as a foundation to engage the team so that we can all learn from them also. So I would say effective documentation of what are issues are coming up as impediment and being able to use the retrospective to effectively resolve that.
Okay. I'd like you to tell me about a time when your team's priorities changed unexpectedly. How did you adapt and ensure delivery?
Yes, so I'll give you an example. This one of the project I was working on, and the company policy had to change. Now, the company policy had to change because the company had to go through some compliance validation. So a third party was brought in, which needed to be part of all the different processes of the team, and also processes of validation. Now, these also mean that um, the flow of information from I would say from product management down to the team was also being validated and had to be validated by this third party. This was quite sudden and also not really comfortable with the team because it slows down how information get to the team. So what we did was instead of doing our backlog refinement bi-weekly as we normally do because we could at least predict the expectation, we had to switch to start doing backlog refinement weekly to ensure that if there are any delays that is coming from the compliance team because all our stories have not gone through them effectively, we can start reminding them on time. So that helped us to ensure that our backlog was quite ready on time. So what specifically we did, introduce another day for backlog refinement, but that solved an issue. That side seems like, oh, it was a bit more for the team, but because that helped them really not have to go through delays, this was like a big win as well.
Hey, thank you, sir. Now, how do you approach identifying and addressing bottlenecks during a sprint?
All right. So, if I understand, when we talk about bottlenecks, we're talking about things that are holding the team back. I'll give you an example. I had a product owner was a bottleneck in my team. And why was the product owner a bottleneck? Not because the product owner did not want to work, because the product owner was also a senior manager who was engaged in so many other projects. So most of the time when the team needed the product owner to clarify most of the stories and also to be there ensuring that studies are ready for spring planning, he was most often not there. Right. So what I did was to do what was to create more like a triage. The triage was bringing one of the full stack developer from my team, and then also working in close collaboration with my tech lead and then myself. So we will work whenever the PO has time. And then he would take time to kind of walk us through what are some of the work that was expected in such a way that when he was not even present at the backlog refinement, or we can easily go through with that. So we had to create a system to adapt to his plan, right? Because it was obvious that he was definitely engaged with other projects also. Now, the second bottleneck I have faced was I joined a team, and there was quite a lot of delay on the flow of work from start to done. And then the bottleneck was that UTA, user acceptance testing, had to be validated by the PMO, which means it was out of the team control. So because of that, the team, most of the story will roll from one sprint to another, waiting for validation from the PMO. So the way I did that was to partner with the PMO and with management to redefine the definition of done in such a way that PMO had to move a bit out of the sprint in such a way that when the team complete all their unit testing and they're ready to move to prod, it's done. And then UTA can now take it from there. In case they find anything, we're ready to accept that as a bug. So that clear a lot of space for the team, and we could effectively start monitoring our performance.
Okay, thank you. Now, I would like to thank you for sharing your insights and experiences. Before we wrap up, is there anything you'd like to highlight that we haven't covered?
Oh yeah, thank you very much. I think it was like a whole lot of questions, but I'm hoping I did some justice to it. Um, I would say you asked almost all the questions that I could expect from an interview, and I just want to say thank you also for giving me the opportunity to interview.
Okay. Uh, do you have any questions for us about the role, the team, or the organization?
Definitely, I have a lot of questions. Now, my first question would be about the team or about the implementation of Agile. The project you're looking for someone to get into, is it an ongoing project? Is it completely new project?
Okay, it's an ongoing project.
Oh, okay, great. If it's an ongoing project, then my next question would be, uh, was there previous Scrum Master before this?
No. So, we recently saw the need for a Scrum Master, and so that's why we are interviewing for this position.
All right, great. Then we have some work to do then. So I believe um, the next step for a new Scrum Master would be, or what somebody you're looking for, would be someone who clearly understand the in and out of Agile and can help the team understand Agile processes and help them go through the process.
Definitely, because we've been having some challenges with this team, and we think we definitely need a Scrum Master.
Okay, I've been in a couple of projects like that, so it's something I can easily handle and help the team grow faster.
Okay.
And my last question, this is not a Scrum question though, it's kind of personally for you. Now, I've seen that you've been around the company for about 10 plus years. So what makes you, what really keeps you there for that long? I'm assuming it must have a really great culture. Or what would you say it's one thing that stand out about your company?
Okay, so one thing that I would say stand out about this company, the reason I've been working here for a while now is the company's culture, like you rightly said, and the inclusiveness, where everybody's views matter, everybody's opinion matter, and it kind of feels like a big family. So it takes it shifts from being a work to like a family, and that's why I enjoy working here.
Yeah, work-life balance is very important for me. Thank you very much. I appreciate your feedback.
Okay. So we appreciate your time today. We'll review all the candidates and get back to you with the next steps soon. Thank
Thank
you.
you, and I'm looking forward to work with you.
All right.
All right, theme. So this how a full interview we go from start to end, right? And you see that I was being interviewed from Radar Agility Institute. What we do is we help people get on the spot like this and prepare them for their next interview. And they actually get in without having any fear. Now, just imagine if you're being in about several hotspots like this. And most often, we're going to do some panel interviews some of the times just to show you how the setting look like. So if you're interested in taking your Scrum journey ahead, what you want to do, check the link below, book an appointment, and then we're going to be happy to help you land a Scrum Master in less than no time. But don't forget to share this video with someone to help them. Don't forget to like and don't forget to subscribe. And we see you in our next mock interview.